Good morning and welcome to another Money Morning Routine and Happy New Year's Eve. Today I completed a lot. I should say yesterday I completed a lot. So I decided to really start going through and closing out my budget yesterday so I could go to the bank. I just wasn't sure of bank hours with the holidays. So I got everything done. I got my paycheck done. I closed out my budget. I stuffed the one cash envelope that I'm going to be using, which is my food envelope. I did a whole bunch of things. Coming next week, I'm going to be doing a full spending overview for 2024 and where all my money went in 2024. That's the great thing. When you're tracking your spending, there is no unknown. I know everything that is happening with my money, where it's going, and how it came into my life. So let's talk about closing out my December budget. The first thing that you need to do is number one, if you have any cash in your cash envelopes left that you did not spend, you need to figure out what to do with that cash and you need to track it. So for example, I had $19, you can see here on my cash expense tracker, $19 was left in my food envelope. I decided to save that for my 100 envelope challenge and I wrote it down. Okay, that's step number one. Step number two, closing out your budget, you need to make sure your spending is fully updated. For me, that meant going over and getting fully aware and updated with my Switzerland spending. Let's talk about that very quickly. So I've talked about before in the past how I spend money on my vacations. I bring a little bit of cash and I only spend on my travel rewards credit card. I use the Capital One Venture Rewards credit card. That's the only way I spend when I'm on vacation. This helps with tracking my spending. All I have to do is jump online into my credit card statement and look at that spending. I was able to print off all the spending and then go through and highlight it into my flight, my food, my hotel, activities, travel, transportation, and purchases. Now, purchases are like clothing or souvenirs. Transportation is anything like maybe an Uber or maybe getting a public bus pass, okay? Anything that includes me getting around. Travel is any checked baggage fees or any money that I might have spent at the airports, maybe during layover or something like that. Activities, that's any fun activities that I did while on my trip. Hotel, food, and flight. Now, what makes it a little bit weird with me is, so with my Switzerland trip, it was included in a baking retreat that I bought, which included hotel in there. So I had to kind of piece this together. So I was able to pay some of that with my rewards credit card, with my rewards points. 2,200 of that, of the 4,200 that I spent on the flight was with rewards. And then also $1,000 part of the hotel was with my rewards as well. So all in all, at the end of the day, so I spent, let's see, so I spent $4,200 total on flight, but $2,200 of that was paid with rewards. I spent a total of $1,513 on food. I spent a total of $2,195 on the hotel. My portion, $1,000 was paid with rewards. Activities was $1,093. Travel was $219, transportation $210, and purchases $2,632 for a total spent of $12,062. $3,200 was covered by rewards, and then $8,862 is what I really spent. Now, this trip was very, very expensive because that baking retreat was included in there. I also believe I wasn't fully prepared with how expensive Zurich in Switzerland is. Just for a meal, every time I had a meal outside of breakfast was free, included in the hotel, but lunches and dinners, I was spending around $100 a meal. That's $200 a day in just food. So I tried my best to really cut that down by taking advantage of those free breakfasts and staying away from the really kind of restaurants. I went to Christmas markets. I got, one day I went and got an empanada for one of the Christmas markets, really cheap. It was about $12. So I was able to find some ways to save there. I also wasn't expecting purchases to be so high for me. Now, I had a $5,000 budget, outside of my flight and hotel to spend. That's just pure spending money. You can see that I really went above and beyond that $5,000. I really had to take away more than I wanted to for my vacation spending, which is bad news because Chris has a trip coming up here in just a few short weeks for a Palm Springs trip. Luckily, we were able to get his round trip tickets for around $200. And I just counted my $5 challenge jar, which I put towards vacation, which is going to replenish it enough for him to do that trip. So yes, it was more than what I expected, but that is my Switzerland trip. So I had to make sure that I went and got that written down on my expense trackers. 8862 was the expense, vacation sinking fund, savings inflow into my life. It was a deposit into my life. Okay, that takes care of spending on my cash side. I got fully updated with my checking account spending. Once everything is updated and highlighted, then we can come over here to my Where Did My Money Go worksheet for my monthly budget category breakdown. Now you can see I started with the starting balance of $998, $6,200. That was my paycheck. And then savings used was quite a bit this month just because I had that vacation. So the only areas I was really over budget, obviously over $4,000 for that trip, $97 in health and beauty because I did have a spa day that I ended up taking away from other cash envelopes for my variable spending. And then you always want to be over for savings of $129. So I know where I was over, but I had places to cover it. Now, with that being said, like I said, I'm going to be doing a full overview of spending for the full 2024. But let me show you what else I got done. Because I started the year off in a different workbook, my yearly spending is in that. It will be different and right for this year, for 2025, but yearly spending worksheet fully done. Okay, let's look at fun. You can see the months I took vacations. I mean, May it was really high, and then we get up into October was really high because why? We had the Arizona trip. It was higher in November. We had that Cabo trip. And then in December, really high because of that Switzerland trip. Do you see where trends are taking place? You can see where maybe things might be out of the norm. Things are maybe spending is spiking or it's really low. This is going to help you map out your future budgets according to your spending versus season over the long term. Now, another thing, okay, a big thing for me is spending for the homestead and garden. So I spent some in January, March, April, but you can really see, okay, so garden, I really didn't spend anything until September, October, and then December. Usually I'm spending money in the spring months because I'm amending my soil, I'm getting seeds. This year though, I really didn't spend all that much outside as far as seeds. I have all my seeds. I was able to, or I had a lot of that already on hand from the previous year. Now, insurance, so household March, $10,206. Well, that's probably for my property taxes there, right? So property taxes paid in March. Insurance, February, house insurance. Okay, you can see that right there. So you can it's just a great way to see these trends as far as over the year. So that's another thing that I got done. Now, let's look at very quickly my new workbook. So because I closed out my budget, it means I'm starting a new tracking period. I closed out December tracking period. I'm starting January tracking period, which means I am now using the full size budget by paycheck workbook that I'm going to be using for 2025. So I have all my beginning pages filled out, prepped, and ready. I've showed this many times on my Instagram and here on YouTube. So those are done. Let's jump into January. Okay, January is when I started doing things. So I started, you could see, writing things in the actual column because things are really, truly happening. I took care. So the first thing I did when I'm starting my new tracking period, and my expense tracker talks for itself. Remember, your expense tracker is a reflection of what you're doing in your real life. So let's go over that. $7,200, got my paycheck, say $7,200, pulled out money for James, did my cash envelopes, but I do see something that needs to be changed. I need to put a line through my envelopes and put don't count, because I'm going to be tracking that money on my cash expense tracker, and I don't want it to be tracked twice. Sinking funds, 1784. Now, let's go back to my budget very quickly. This year, I am no longer saving cash for my sinking funds. They're in separate savings accounts at my credit union. I bank at a credit union that allows me to have as many savings accounts as I want, no minimum, no fees. I can label them, I can color code them. It's fantastic. It's like having the buckets, right? So you see these ones with little arrows? These are the main short-term savings goals that I have. And if you go back to the beginning of my workbook and you look at my financial plan, you can see I have important short-term priority goals that I'm trying to fund. $5,000 for a Yellowstone vacation that's going to be happening in September, $5,000 for an Arizona vacation that's going to be happening in October, and I want to increase my pet fund by $3,000 in 2025, and hopefully I don't have to use it because I just depleted it with what happened with Toby and the cancer scare at the end of this last year. I'm also going to be using my Pine Manor Naturals income once I start selling again in January, which I'm going to be start making soap here this week. These are the main ones that I am tracking. So I have arrows, and I want to separate those out from my sinking funds so I can track those individually. So sinking funds, which is everything in pink, minus the one in blue and minus the one in arrows, were all done. I did online transfers when I got home after depositing my paycheck, which is why all the actual column is filled out here. $200 went to that Yellowstone trip. $127 went to the Arizona one. $200 to increasing that pet fund. $450 went to that joint checking account for Dante spending, and $300 for cleaning, which you can see I've already filled out here on my actual column of my budget. So when I get paid and I'm starting a new tracking period, by the way, I also saved $100 for my homestead. This is for hay purchases. Now let me bring this over. So this is all the money that either I've accumulated, maybe I sold something, any cash that comes in my life. Also, by the way, $19 of this, remember, was from leftover food cash that I had that I didn't spend it in December. But here is my homestead homestead cash envelope. This is where I'm saving that money for hay purchases because we buy our hay with cash. So this is just a thing that sits on my desk to use for saving my 100 envelope challenge and my hay purchases. Because I'm saving that in cash, I have it over here on my cash expense tracker for the hay purchases. And also, I have my food envelope that I stuffed with the $900. So I have that. That's ready to go to be spent in January. So anytime I get paid, anytime I'm starting a new tracking period, I'm depositing my paycheck. I'm doing certain things like, money for James, which is grandma, Eileen, watching James a little bit before and after school so I can pick him up. I'm doing my sinking funds. I'm pulling out cash for any cash envelopes that I'm using for that tracking period, any savings goals, and any other areas where I have to do transfers like that $450 for Dante. And then any savings in cash I write on my cash expense tracker. I am full 100% ready to go for January. Now, before I end this video, I know it's a little long today, $1,022.28 is my starting balance. And you might be saying, Nico, where did you get that? Let's bring over my December very quickly. My December tracking expense trackers. So do you see in December here, when I was closing out my December tracking period and starting January, I had $1,022.28 in my checking account. That was what is going into January with me for my new tracking period. So it goes right up here at the top. Now, how I like to remember this is if you're wondering and having troubles in maybe your tracking isn't adding up. A lot of it might have to do with your starting balance. Okay, here's how I do it. Okay, this is my workbook for December. This is my workbook for January. Your ending balance for the previous month, which is December, should be your starting balance in the new month, which is January. See how these match? Ending balance, starting balance. You should always have a starting balance unless you are truly starting the new tracking period with $0, which a lot of us, most of us, should have some money left in our checking account, especially if you do a checking account cushion like I teach and preach here at the Budget Mom. So that's what I got going and done with my morning routine. Now, because I have 2 different workbooks this last year that I use, you might be asking, Miko, what do you do with these? Well, I take out the used ones and I scan them into an external hard drive. So I have my old budgets where I can reference back to them. The remaining pages, I salvage what I think I'm going to be using or I can use again, and the rest I recycle. So that is what I do with my old workbooks. I get that question a lot, and that is my morning routine.